What's going on, everybody? It is that time again, the Sooners Illustrated podcast, episode 191 on this Monday, July 14th, 2025, 47 days till the kickoff of the 2025 Oklahoma football season. We are gearing up. We are ready. Did I already say our names? Josh Callaway, Collin Kennedy with you on a Monday. I don't know if I said that or not.
No, you did not. You know what? It's off because the moment we started this, I realized I'm not used to the odd number shows. So
Yeah.
I too am a little bit out of my groove when you started off with the 191. Is that correct?
Yeah, it feels a little weird. We mentioned we were going to do this last week, but we flipped the schedule around. Collin and I are going to be with you here today because Tom Green and I are flying out to Atlanta tomorrow for SEC Media Days. We'll have coverage from Atlanta on Wednesday when OU takes center stage. And then I figure we'll circle back with Tom and James on Friday to recap SEC Media Days. Then we'll get back on normal schedule next week as we start to really gear up for fall camp in the start of the season. But we're getting close. SEC Media Days actually got underway today. But Collin and I will dive into what we're looking for this week, both from Oklahoma as well as other teams over the next few days. There are some intriguing teams to hear from in relation to OU. Certainly some interesting players. Former OU players that will be there representing other teams this week. So we'll kind of lay it all out. What are we watching for from SEC Media Days over the next few days? But before we do that, obviously Collin is our primary recruiting insider. We talk about recruiting heavily with him whenever we are able to have him, and we were going to do so again today. Going into the weekend, Collin, we talked about a couple of names, Jordan Clay, Jacob Eberhardt, that were making decisions over the weekend. You were much more positive about potentially Eberhardt than Clay. Zachary Turner, another guy we talked about a few times, also made a decision over the weekend. All guys didn't go to Oklahoma. Eberhardt goes to Illinois. Yeah. Jordan Clay goes to Baylor, as expected. Zachary Turner went to SMU, I believe it was, over the weekend. So obviously not a great weekend for Oklahoma recruiting, to say the least, right? I mean, you got a few names we've talked about that they've been involved with. And again, confidence levels vary there as far as how Sooners felt going into like their actual decision day. But, you know, they miss out on some guys here, Eberhardt in particular being the one, and you were detailing it to our VIP members, you know, over the weekend that even the morning of his decision day on Saturday, things still felt pretty positive for OU, but it moved away by the time he actually made the call to Illinois. So I'm just going to ask you straight up the way that a fan would ask you, you know, any OU fans are probably wondering, should they be worried? You know, should they be concerned? Obviously, it was not a great weekend. It's been a few misses here recently, you know, because they had all this momentum. It felt like after they went through that dry spell of over 3+ months without anybody jumping in 2026, they were hot for a few weeks. A lot of guys added. Obviously, you got Bo Bentley, the big one there. Felt like some momentum. And now you had a few kind of tough misses here recently. So, you know as well as anyone, and you're also very level-headed with these sort of things. So I'm just going to ask you, I mean, how are you kind of feeling about Oklahoma in 2026 right now after this weekend and some of the misses, in particular Eberhardt, right? Because, again, that's the one that it felt Oklahoma was in good shape for until they weren't really on Saturday.
Yeah, so there's a number of ways that you could attempt to answer this question because it's such a loaded question. And I'll attempt by simply kind of starting on a case-to-case basis because I do think it kind of illuminates what level of concern should be had. And what I mean by that is like, look, it never is fun for a program to lose out on guys that you want. That being said, you always kind of have to determine whether or not you actually have a shot, where exactly you stand in those recruitments. And in the case of some of these guys that made their decisions over the weekend, it's like, I mean, okay, you're not really looking at that one like Oklahoma's taking a punch to the chest. Jordan Clay, like you mentioned, we had been reporting for months, it felt like, that Baylor was in the driver's seat. So you can't be shocked by that one. Zachary Turner, Oklahoma wasn't even really getting a lot of buzz around that decision. I also think that you and I talked about it coming out of his official visit that I had put a crystal ball in for a program elsewhere, even though he had just taken his OV at Norman. So that one was going a different direction, even when Oklahoma was more involved. I think it's just tough because you see those situations play out the way that they did. And then Jacob Eberhardt, it's like, you know, like you mentioned, it wasn't even just like the morning. I mean, even a couple hours away, I was told that Oklahoma felt good about what was potentially coming down the wire.
Yeah.
And lo and behold, a few hours after some conversations, it still went in Illinois' favor. And this is the other thing, too. It's like that was a kick in the teeth for Oklahoma. There's no way around it. Like, it's a real kick in the teeth. I really do believe that the assumption out there, even like maybe 24 to 48 hours prior, was that Oklahoma was probably in the driver's seat to go ahead and get that one done. But you also can't blame Jacob Eberhardt for committing to the program that arguably held a lead going into his OU official visit. And on top of that, his late father, who passed away in 2023, played for the Illini back in the day. So he's an Illinois legacy. His dad was an alumni of the football program, tragically lost his father a couple years ago. You can't fault the young man for making an emotional decision or even feeling the emotions a couple days out and navigating those to get to this end result. And so why I bring that up, I'm not going to fault any fan out there for being concerned. I think that fans are well within their right to at least be a little bit inquisitive or curious as to why a lot of decisions are not going Oklahoma's direction right now. That being said, they added a ton of bodies in June, right? I mean, a ton of bodies in June. You cannot overlook that. I can't remember the exact number off the top of my head, but you factor in a number of commitments that came in about a month ago, less, and then you just have to also understand that Oklahoma is still navigating everything that we have talked about since the conclusion of the 2024 season, and that's just not going to go away until they play games, and that's obviously going to be discussed heavily at SEC Media Days this week, but that's been discussed heavily behind the scenes in recruiting circles for as long as you can imagine. And I just think that right now, the Oklahoma fan base is kind of coming to terms with what I believe the current Oklahoma staff has already come to understand, in that the 2024 season cannot be ignored by anyone out there, especially recruits trying to make multi-year decisions, whether that's what they want out of the collegiate level or even into the NFL. So in so many words, should fans be worried? I'm not going to fault them if they are. I'm not going to I can't blame them one bit if they're concerned. But I also think that, as I always say, recruiting is such a layered world, and there's a lot going into these decisions that, like I just kind of navigated earlier, you can't even really fault Oklahoma for in those instances. So OU's continuing to chip away. And I think that it does help too, if I'm quite honest with you, that 2026 isn't necessarily the most talent-laden recruiting cycle either. So if there is a recruiting cycle to struggle in my opinion, it would be this one. Now, if this type of dynamic trickles into the 2027 cycle, which is, in my opinion, far more full of talent and deeper, then we're going to have even more conversations. But there are going to be things that happen as a result of that they're going to have some implications on that front, if you know what I mean. So again, it's a hard question to answer. I can't fault folks one bit for being very confused or even a little bit upset the way that the recent trends have been going. But whether it's like I talked about, these decisions that have things going on besides Oklahoma, or the number of commitments that were just added that are already being overlooked because the tunnel vision on the month of July, and then obviously all of the context we have as far as Oklahoma as a program in the midst of figuring some things out, it's going to carry weight on the recruiting trail, and OU is in the middle of navigating it with a lot of players coming off the board.
Yeah, I'm with you. I wouldn't blame, any Oklahoma fan that is feeling a little, uneasy with the weekend. Like you said, in particular with Eberhardt, that was one that, I think a lot of you fans had kind of, you know, had already penciled in a lot of ways as being a guy for them. And, I certainly
Yeah.
had started to do like the class calculator thing, seeing what kind of a jump that was going to give them. And then all of a sudden it was like, boom, Illinois. He was like, oh, okay, so I don't blame any Oklahoma fan there. I will say, we've all seen Jim Nagy's comments that he had whenever that was a few weeks ago, right, where he kind of talked about the approach and not really being worried about the star ratings, right, and things like that. And that all, remains to be seen, right? I mean, this is Jim Nagy and this group's first cycle, right? So we don't know if it'll be different in the future. And we don't know how many of these guys are going to, maybe they've struck gold on a lot of these guys who are lower rated. Who knows, right? This class may end up being awesome. I mean, who really knows,
Mm-hmm.
right? And there's also the reality that, like you said, Oklahoma needs to win. It's really hard coming off a year where you stunk. You won 6 games. The head coach spot is, shaky, right? I mean, a lot of these guys don't know that Brent Venables and this staff are going to be there for the long haul, right? I mean, everyone's hopeful, but they don't know that. I mean, the kids aren't naive to that and their families, right? So you got a lot kind of working against you for Oklahoma right now. And again, all that said, you don't know if this class is poor, right? And nobody's saying, and you still got some big. I mean, you look at Jake Kroll, who we've talked about a few times. You're still right back in like the top 20 off that one guy, right? So I agree with you. I think it's fair to be concerned, but I don't know if and just being, I mean, in my honest opinion, I don't know if I would be smashing the panic button yet. Now, optically, it is kind of rough right now for Oklahoma. That's inarguable.
Yeah.
But again, if you go win games, it all comes down to just winning games. If you go win games in the fall, it'll all be fine in the long run, which I know is a simplistic view, but that's how I feel about it. Let me ask you this. What's realistic at this point? For this class, like I mentioned, they're like in the mid 30s right now. That's about where they've been for quite a while now. They get a guy, they jump up to like 31, 32. Other teams also add, so they slip back a few spots. You get a guy, you go back up to 30. Like it's kind of been hanging around in this zone, the mid 30s zone. I just mentioned Jake Kroll. Obviously, we talked a lot about Davian Gross. I know that we're kind of on a wait and see with him. Like it seems like any day sort of a thing.
Yeah.
You can speak to that better than me. But what's kind of, I guess, the expectations or what are the goals for Oklahoma the rest of the way in this 26 cycle? Like how good could this class still really end up being if you want to put a ranking on it, feel free. But I mean, what's kind of, I don't know if next is the right word, but what's realistic? What are kind of your expectations the rest of the way before they actually sign this group in December?
So off the heels of what you said, Jake Kroll would get you around the top 20. If you were to add Davian Gross as well, which I still personally believe Oklahoma is in best position in that recruitment right now, although Baylor continues to chip away. If you were to just add those two to this current group, you're hovering around 17 overall in the country in the recruiting class rankings.
Which is right where they were last year, right?
I was about to say, I think you would take that if you are Oklahoma, because at that point, that would put you at 17 commits, and you finish 17th in 2025. So, I mean, I think that's what you're shooting for right now, right? Like,
sure.
Those two targets still remain very realistic in my eyes. I think that Oklahoma's in the lead for Jake Kroll. I think Oklahoma's in the lead for Davian Gross. Now, as we know, especially off the heels of Eberhardt's decision, anything can really happen here. But, man, off those two guys alone, if you were to take just a 17-man class and be in the top 17 where you were a cycle ago as well, I think you absolutely run to the hills with that class, especially considering, again, you're off of a struggling season. You're navigating everything from negative recruiting to NIL rev share and a new front office staff and a new offensive coordinator, everything that OU is transitioning into, and it's just not that great of a cycle either. Like, I think you would be very fine with being somewhere close to the top 17 or 18. And then, in my opinion, especially with someone like Jim Nagy, who is going to value proven talent, take that 17-man class and get to the transfer portal window and backfill from there. Because we've seen, whether it's John Mateer to Jay Knott to a ton of the other transfers we're probably getting ready to talk about in the SEC Media Days portion of this show, they will do well when it comes to talent acquisition out of the portal. And I feel like that's important to consider as well as we talk about this 2026 class. So I don't know. I mean, again, you had a couple more guys, Gross and Kroll, two of your highest priorities, and you get into the top 17 where you were a year ago. And then, might I add, you still would have senior eval season in the fall. And Oklahoma is willing to look at guys, how they play their senior years, and then potentially recruit them down the stretch ahead of the December signing period. So who knows? Maybe you go up even higher if you identify and offer a couple of guys and pursue them because you feel they can be late adds that elevate your group as well. I think there's a lot that goes into it. I think that you have to kind of understand, again, where Oklahoma is and where the 2026 class is. But if you put it all together and then add in the transfer portal layer, like, I feel like that's what's realistic, in my opinion. Try to get to this top 17, get back to where you were a year ago and let it ride from there.
No doubt. We'll continue to obviously talk about it. It's going to be a major talking point the rest of the summer, certainly. And again, I just fall back to the same thing. You win games, a lot of this gets sorted out in the long run.
Right.
You know, Oklahoma is still Oklahoma, but they're battling against it, right? Again, rough year, coach's future a little unsure. It's new landscape of college sports, like everything we kind of talked about. It's really kind of the perfect storm for Oklahoma to kind of struggle a little bit on the recruiting side. And again, they still could be okay. I know that you don't, especially with what just happened with Eberhardt, you don't want to ever account anything before it happens, but you go get a Jay Kroll, you'll get a Davian Gross. I mean, it can make this class look a lot different very, very quickly. So we'll continue to cover it. Again, subscribe to Sooners Illustrated, Oklahoma247sports.com. Collin's been absolutely all over it. He was updating our VIP members all day on Saturday with Eberhardt. So if you're with us, you were braced for impact at least a little bit on Saturday if you're with us at Sooners Illustrated. So subscribe, jump in midsummer, and a lot more to come over the rest of the summer, and obviously in the fall camp and all that good stuff coming up here very, very soon. So on that note, I mentioned it. SEC Media Days off and running today. As we record this, we've already actually heard from Greg Sankey, who was feeling really good this morning. If you saw the stuff he was saying, he was spitting lava this morning. We also got Brian Kelly from LSU and Shane Beamer from South Carolina, who's always great to hear from. Obviously, former OU assistant, still very well liked around here. Tom Green and I are going to be flying out to Atlanta tomorrow. Oklahoma is set to take center stage on Wednesday. We'll hear from Brent Venables. We'll hear from John Mateer, R. Mason Thomas, and Robert Spears Jennings, who will all be there representing Oklahoma. For Auburn, Jackson Arnold going to be there on Tuesday, which is very, very interesting and fortunate scheduling for Tom and I because we're going to be there on Tuesday. So we'll get to hear from Jackson, which will be, I think, interesting. I was kind of joking about it when the participants came out, Collin. I mean, his scrum is going to be more OU reporters probably than Auburn reporter. He's going to field a lot of OU questions. I'm sure he knows that, but he's got to be prepping for how he wants to handle all that, because that's going to be very interesting just to kind of hear him talk about last year and all of that. I think that's going to be very interesting on Tuesday. But for you, I'm just going to open it up. I mean, what are you looking for? Let's make it Oklahoma specific, I guess, to start, whether it's something from BV, John Mateer, the team in general. Is there anything that sticks out to you as like, I'm curious to hear what they have to say about this on Wednesday?
Well, I want to hear you lead it off because there's a couple different ways you could go about this. But let's start with the head ball coach. Let's narrow it down. What, from your end, are you looking for from Brent Venables, or any specific topics you're curious about that Brent might be addressing on Wednesday.
Yeah, for me, the one that jumps out right away for Brent specifically is definitely the what's the word I'm looking here? The dynamic. That's the word I couldn't find. Tired today. The dynamic with Jim Nagy and how that's gone over the last few months. Because I mean, look, we only talked to Brent. We talked to Brent in March when Jim had just got hired, so hadn't done anything. And then we talked to Brent after the Crimson Combine, right, which was kind of wrapping up spring. I don't remember if he even talked to him. He probably did a little. I really can't remember. It was over 3 months ago. So, like, they've had this entire summer. They had the post-spring portal window. They've had, obviously, the recruiting, all the stuff we just talked about. I'm very interested now this far into it to hear Brent's kind of input on how that whole thing is working and the whole front office structure and him being able to relinquish a little power to Jim. And now Joe Castiglione is retiring and they're going to have a new AD coming in. Like, that's the stuff I'm really curious to hear Brent on. Obviously, I want to hear his thoughts on the team because, again, we haven't heard from him since spring. And, some of the guys they've added, a Jay Knott. So it's things that have changed since we last talked to him in a formal setting. But the whole, like, feng shui kind of just overall dynamic of the program with Jim, the front office, Joe C. Like, I'm very curious to see how he talks about that because, Venables is a guy who's very honest and he chooses his words carefully, but he's honest, right? So I'm curious to see if he's willing to acknowledge that it's kind of been a little difficult, or if what kind of picture he paints. That really interests me because I'm certain he'll get asked about that, and that interests me probably more than anything with Brent specifically on Wednesday.
Yeah, that's one of the first things that came to mind for me as well, is because, like you mentioned, Brent may choose his words carefully, but I would almost say he chooses his words carefully at times where in other instances he is very honest and he will give you a couple of nuggets that not a lot of head coaches will give to the public. And I think, for the record, I greatly appreciate that about Brent because there will be moments and times in press conferences where you'll actually get him to share his feelings and thoughts. And there's so much value in that, especially because I think now more than ever, head coaches, I mean, today watching Brian Kelly almost like hold court about the state of college football and recruiting and NIL rev share, like BK was talking about how his personnel department is evaluating potential transfer candidates from the state of Louisiana on other rosters in September. And then also added, I'm talking to players that I don't normally talk to at all about revenue share percentages. And it's like, I think now we're talking to these head coaches less about tell me about so-and-so on the team or how they, so-and-so. And now it's like, can you please help explain how these big picture dynamics are going? And in Brent's instance specifically, the front office stuff with a GM of the caliber of Jim Nagy, especially, and this is just tricky, but I got to go ahead and say it. You and I both know that since we've last talked to Brent, there have been on the record instances essentially indicating Nagy has a good amount of power within the program, and I don't know what.
I think it's fair to say that Jim might have more say than Brent. Right.
I mean, whether I believe it was Joe Castiglione or Jim Nagy or some other folks, and it's on the record. There are quotes essentially indicating that Oklahoma is giving Jim Nagy several keys on the key ring, and there's that dynamic that I don't know how much Brent will discuss, but I'm sure he'll get asked, and I would love to hear his thoughts as the head coach of the University of Oklahoma, and a respected mind and a respected person. But then also, I think bringing in a new offensive coordinator and handing the keys to his own future to Ben Arbuckle. What does that working relationship look like with not only Arbuckle, but those guys that have come in with him? And how much has Brent not only given them full reign to oversee that side of the ball? Where is Brent right now in terms of handling defensive coordinator responsibilities himself. So I combine it all to basically mention whether it's exactly what you're talking about. Tell us about how things are going with Nagy and this new front office staff. Tell us how you're doing trusting in Ben Arbuckle. Tell us how you're doing and trusting yourself to get back into being the play caller of the defense as the head coach. Not that he should ever have confidence wavered in himself, but we know the type of year that is ahead.
Sure.
So those are a few topics for me. If you have anything else to add on that, feel free. But the other thing for me from Brent, because there's so many things we could mention here.
Oh, yeah.
I am ready and waiting for the health updates.
Yeah. Specifically the two Gibsons, right? I mean, what's realistic to expect from those guys?
And look, the Gibsons, Jaden Jackson, Logan Howland, key players off of a year where any injury meant significant. Like we're getting asked every single week about those guys I just mentioned. Gentry Williams. All these other cats out there that got banged up or had reconstructive surgeries out of the season where they played hurt.
Kendall Dolby.
That is the other primary storyline in my eyes is what can Brent share about the health of this team going into a pivotal season off of one of the most injury-ridden years I've ever seen, because it just every injury now at Oklahoma has a little bit more of an edge to it. And I think we're all hanging on pins and needles waiting to see who's going to be good to go and who may not be with fall camp right around the corner.
For sure. All those guys, especially the two Gibsons. Because, the wide receiver room, that in a year that was loaded with injuries, the wide receiver room was the biggest one. Right? Nobody was healthy the whole year, basically. So, those two guys, back in the spring, back in April, Brent said that he thought both guys would be ready for the start of the season. What does that mean? I don't think either guy has really been doing much at summer workouts. At least that's the impression that I've gotten. So, whenever we get to fall camp, what is going to be happening? And especially with Jaden, Giovanni Gibson broke his leg. He was having a great camp. You kind of have a timeline there of what's realistic. Hopefully maybe by SEC play, he's 100%, maybe earlier, who knows? But with Jaden, Jaden Gibson has been a ghost, right? But we haven't seen him, literally even seen him in forever. He was out all last year. Obviously he was around at games and stuff, but he wasn't around much during the spring. And he was a guy that a lot of us thought, is he going to maybe look to transfer? What's his market? He's still here. Obviously he's with Oklahoma for another year. He had a great 2023, was trending definitely upward before the injury happened. And then he has a setback in the spring, and it's what's realistic to expect from him at all? Because that's a huge playmaker if he's anywhere close to himself. So those are those two guys. Giovanni, I think everyone had Giovanni penciled in as the number 2 guy behind Burks, and Jaden could certainly be that too if he's himself, but we haven't seen him in pushing on 2 years now, right? So those two guys in particular in the wide receiver room, very curious what the update there is, if there really is one, from DV for sure. The players, Mateer, like I said, R. Mason Thomas, Robert Spears Jennings. I think everyone's just excited to hear from Mateer just because he's the guy now. For John, we heard from him right at the beginning of spring, and then he talked, I think, once during spring practice. I guess he also talked after the combine too, I assume. I can't remember. That feels like so long ago. And then obviously Robert Spears Jennings and R. Mason Thomas, 2 of the big pieces of this defense. Is there anything in particular that jumps out from you for those guys? I'm kind of just interested to hear from all of them and roundabout. For Mateer, the hype train has gotten bigger and bigger and bigger for him with each passing month. It's definitely bigger now, at least nationally, than it even was back in the spring. Any national list of top 10 quarterbacks, whatever, he's on it, anyone's list. So that's new for him, right? He didn't play at a big high school. He wasn't highly recruited at all. He played at Washington State. Like, he has never had a spotlight like this. He totally seems ready for it, but I'm curious to see how he kind of handles himself, right? I mean, he's going to have probably a big scrum, right? Like, he's going to be a draw at this thing on Wednesday. That's a little different for him, which he even joked about when he had his press conference back in March, and he came out, and obviously the OU media contingent is big, and he made a joke like, a lot more cameras here than Washington State. And he handled himself great, but like, that's going to be even bigger now at SEC Media Days because they're going to be a lot of national attention on him on Wednesday. So that's an obvious one. Anything with the players, though, that stands out to you from these three guys?
So quickly going through here's what I think is going to be the most discussed storylines with each, and here's what I'm actually interested in. You ready?
Mm-hmm.
John Mateer, are you ready to transition into the SEC?
Yeah.
How prepared do you feel to play an actual Power Four ball? How much pressure is on your shoulders? Do you blah, 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 Ben Arbuckle. How does it feel to have the fate of a program like Oklahoma's in your hands? All that stuff's going to be talked about. And I think out of it, people are going to fall in love with John Mateer this week. I really believe that. I think a lot of the SEC media sphere has already kind of tabbed him as like their next Baker Mayfield. Right. And I get it. I mean, I was listening to Greg McElroy earlier today, already throwing that comp out on day one of media days. What I would actually like to know from John Mateer, though, Josh, tell me about how installing this offense is going for not just Arbuckle, but for you, right? Because we know that when Dylan Gabriel came into Oklahoma with Jeff Lebby, Dylan Gabriel, the reports out of summer camp and all of that was like, Dylan Gabriel's teaching these guys as much as Jeff is. He's a coach on the field. He's having to help these players learn OU's new system. That's kind of the same stuff we're hearing right now, that John is explaining to the guys around him how this is supposed to look, what you're supposed to do. And there's even been clips released by Oklahoma of Arbuckle calling a play, and John Mateer is turned away halfway through the call because he already knows what's coming. How is that going? Where are you at in that process? And how has that helped in terms of building chemistry with the other players, right? Because half of offense is execution. Another half of offense is timing and chemistry. What has that done for John in his transition into Norman in terms of getting to know the guys around him? And how much does he think that's going to help whenever it's time to actually put the pads on and go play some ball? Robert Spears-Jennings, what I think will be asked of him is, Brent calling the defense. Billy Bowman's gone. Are you ready to be that leader? How much better can this defense get? Stuff like that. What I want to learn from him, can you tell me how you feel all of these young defensive backs are doing and how ready they are to go, whether it's the corners or the safeties? Because I think we would all agree Billy Bowman out means Robert Spears-Jennings is going to have to kind of put the finishing touches of development on guys like Jacoby Johnson, Eli Bowen, Jeremiah Newcomb, Devin Jordan, over to Jaden Hardy, Reggie Powers, Michael Boganowski, all young guys who will probably have their number called upon during this season. RSJ, I think the world of RSJ. I still personally believe he's one of the most underappreciated players on that Oklahoma roster. I think he's really good. How much better does he feel about them, knowing he probably already feels really good about himself? And if we can get anything out of him in relation to that, that's going to tell us a lot about the state of OU's defensive back core, a group that I would argue has a lot of question marks surrounding it going into the season. And then last but certainly not least, Josh, and then I want to kick it to you for anything player-wise. Mason Thomas, can you become a complete player? Have you heard all the NFL draft noise? Can you do more beyond the fourth quarter? Are you ready to be a captain of this team? Blah, 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 blah. Here's what I want to know. Is Marvin Jones Jr. the most under-discussed major addition of Oklahoma's entire offseason?
Yeah.
And like, what can he do to help R. Mason Thomas unlock his full potential? Because I'm going to be honest with you, I don't know of another former 5-star with NFL bloodlines that is less discussed in my career than Marvin Jones Jr. I really don't know. And how has that duo built up something together on that defense? What can they look like? And where is MJJ? And then how does R. Mason Thomas feel this defensive line is currently constructed? Where is PJ Adebaware? How receptive is PJ Adebaware right now to R. Mason Thomas's teachings or MJJ? I don't know. Danny Okoye. How does R. Mason Thomas feel about someone like Okoye? R. Mason Thomas, another who you and I have both been high on for a very long time. He took that step forward last year that you and I were both anticipating, and many others. It's not like we were the leaders, but I think because of what R. Mason Thomas knows about what that's supposed to look like, he can be very insightful in terms of telling all of us where the other guys are at in terms of their advancement of their careers on the defensive front. So stuff that I think I'm very interested to hear from these players going into Wednesday.
No, I mean, you read my mind with the defensive end room fascinates me because it is a lot of, like, I mean, obviously R. Mason's your guy. I mean, he's arguably the most talented player on the roster, right? I mean, there's a few guys you may argue before, but he's right up there. I mean, he's first round potential. We've seen his ability to take over games as an edge rusher. But like you said, Marvin Jones, like, what has that been like for him? Certainly PJ, is he ready for that jump? Danny Okoye is a guy everyone's excited about. Taylor Wine is a guy that a lot of people are excited about. Like, that edge rusher room is very interesting. Who do they have that can kind of fill that Trace Ford role? Like, can get back in coverage? Do they have a guy like that? These are all things that R. Mason will be asked. And he's not the coach. He's not Miguel Chavis. He's not Brent Venables. But he should be, you would think, equipped to at least, give his best guess on how he thinks that those guys are doing. Because I've been asked in various roles, doing radio or whatever, like, who's lining up opposite R. Mason Thomas, and I assume it'll be Marvin Jones, but I don't know. It's a very interesting room, and I love the talent there, but it's just a lot up in the air for, like, what kind of season some of these guys are actually going to have, So, and we talk a lot about the defensive tackle room is awesome. So it's like, if you get an edge rusher, another guy to really step up to go with R. Mason, you're talking about a defensive line that will be one of the best in the SEC, which is what a lot of people have speculated is possible for this group. So very, very exciting there with the defensive end room for sure. And R. Mason, it'd be nice to hear from him, because it's a huge year for him. Obviously, he could have jumped. He's back. I asked him myself back during the spring about the decision to come back, and he basically said, not finished product. I just felt like I had a lot to get better on, and before I moved on. And so, interesting to see how that's going, over the course of the summer and getting into fall camp here coming up the next few weeks or so.
Yep.
Yeah.
So let's move from the Oklahoma group.
Yeah, I was going to ask
anything else that
stands out from the other teams. I mean, I'll say day one is in progress now. But so, like, tomorrow, I believe Tuesday is when Texas, and I mentioned Auburn will be there with Jackson Arnold, Mississippi State and Jeff Lebby, who they're actually bringing Brennan Thompson, who I just completely, frankly, overlooked until today. I was kind of surveying getting ready for this show, and I was like, oh, they're bringing Brennan Thompson. I didn't even realize that. Is there another team or coach or player, I mean, that stands out to you of interest this week, whether it's even today or later this week or whatever it may be? Is there something conference-wide that jumps out to you?
So let's start here, because you led off with it, and it's got to be talked about. Jackson Arnold's going to be there. And
I mean, yeah, that is. I'm as interested. It's sicko, but I'm as interested in Jackson as Oklahoma on Wednesday.
Yeah.
Truthfully,
I think a lot of people are in that same boat, right?
Yeah.
Because I've been listening to a lot of people talk about this season for Oklahoma. I've listened to a lot of people talk about the season for Auburn and the SEC, and I think the general consensus is, think about how insane it is going into this year that around a year ago this time, we thought it was the beginning of the Jackson Arnold era at Oklahoma, that like he had a chance to be the next guy with a statue outside the stadium, and he's in a different uniform, not even a year later. And at the center of so many question marks, not only in relation to his own game, but that Auburn program's got a lot on the line as well. I mean, we want to talk about hot seats and quarterbacks. And I mean, Hugh Freeze has been in the headlines all offseason and largely for the wrong reasons, right?
For sure.
So, and I was thinking about this, man. I almost feel bad for Jackson Arnold because back-to-back years now, SEC Media Days for him is going to be a circus. I still remember sitting outside. It was obviously down here in Dallas.
That's right.
I went, and the first few questions he fielded out of several that week were all about how shaken his confidence may have been out of his Alamo Bowl appearance before becoming the starter, and all the turnovers that he had, and where was he at with his game, and everyone kind of questioning him as a player set to take the reins of a program. Now, obviously, that ended up being totally justified, and I didn't think it was at the time. But, like, I guess what I'm trying to say, Jackson Arnold was pretty visibly frustrated, or maybe even a little bit annoyed at times with how often people were kind of taking passive-aggressive digs at his game before becoming a starter at Oklahoma. That was his first SEC Media Days experience. Now this year, I mean, it's that times 1,000 because it's not just Oklahoma. I mean, Auburn media right now they're on one, maybe. They're on one, and Auburn media, they're used to access and they're used to asking the tough questions because they're not going around. They're not going anywhere. So I guess I just really want to start there and get your thoughts, because to me, like, Jackson Arnold's day at SEC Media Days is legitimately one of the most important this entire week for anyone there.
Sure.
He will be at the center of everyone's attention, and that's not an exaggeration. And again, I think it's a testament to how crazy the last year has been for both Oklahoma and himself.
No doubt. I mean, there would be a lot of interest there to hear from him and just how, just everything from last year and this offseason. Because I'm very curious, this offseason, Oklahoma is gushing about their new guy, John Machir.
Yeah.
Brent Venables has been very open about everything that John Machir has done, stuff we didn't hear last year about Jackson. And obviously, again, like you said, with the benefit of hindsight, we kind of see why now, right? I mean, the season went very, very poorly. And we talked about during fall camp last year that Jackson was struggling, turning it over, and like all that good stuff. All that stuff ended up spilling into the season and being our reality. And let's not overlook the obvious either. Auburn plays in Norman on September 20th, week 4, the SEC opener. Like, Jackson, more than likely, unless, he just lost the job or is injured, is going to be the starting quarterback as the road team in Norman in a shade over 2 months. I'm really interested to see what he says about that game in particular and what the emotions are like for him. He may sidestep it completely and not really want to talk about it, or he may be willing to kind of say, like, yeah, I've thought about it and it's going to be whatever, right? I'm very curious because if he's not, I will ask him if it, I want to know. I mean, coming back to Norman in a little over 2 months with the way the last year went and the way this offseason's gone, like, what are the emotions like for him? How does he feel about OU right now, right? It's interesting to me. So, yeah, Jackson is, outside of the OU, for us covering Oklahoma, outside of hearing from them, it's hard to argue anyone else is more interesting than Jackson. I mean, there are a lot of other angles. I mean, it's always fun to hear from Texas, obviously, and Arch Manning will be there, which I imagine his scrum will be record-setting for the size of that thing. I'll probably not going to bother to even try to battle my way into that because that sounds like it's going to be a nightmare. We mentioned Jeff Lebby, Brennan Thompson, another former Sooner, will be there on Wednesday, which is the same day as Oklahoma. So you got Josh Heupel in Tennessee. I mean, there's a lot of connections and obviously teams that OU plays that will stick out. But it's hard to argue anything is more interesting than Jackson. That goes without saying a bit. But
yeah, it'll be cool to hear from Heupel. I always enjoy listening to Beamer today.
Beamer was great as per usual. Yeah,
I was sitting there going, man, I really wish Tennessee brought Joey Aguilar. Like that feels like a huge missed opportunity for a lot of us. Just learning about that whole dynamic.
Yeah.
How
many questions is Heupel going to get? Like double digit?
Minimum. I mean, the over-under's got to have to be in the 20s, right? Yeah. You could convince me even higher with, how much stuff they cycle them through in the car wash that is SEC Media Days.
True.
I would be curious to hear from Brennan Thompson as far as just like what last year looked like for him being open at times and just not getting the ball, what role he played. And then I would be curious to know what his exit from Oklahoma looked like.
Yeah.
Brennan's a guy that's honest. I think he's someone who will pull the curtain back on last season for the Sooners and for himself. A guy that, in his mind, he probably deserved more in the midst of a tough season. And I get it. I like listening to Jeff Levy. I've always liked listening to Jeff talk ball and discuss stuff. I'll give you one last thing though. Sankey talked about like SEC scheduling and playoff. I think all that stuff. I don't think a lot of fans out there really care right now, to be quite honest with you.
On that, yeah.
You know who I'm curious to hear from? Alabama.
Yeah.
The quarterback situation.
They're not bringing that team back, are they? Are they bringing a quarterback?
They are not. So obviously Alabama, the thrilling win over Georgia to the loss at Oklahoma that left so many scratching their heads related to the Crimson Tide. Alabama's arguably one of the more difficult teams for me to figure out right now on Oklahoma's schedule. Because
no doubt,
new quarterback, a lot of guys transferred out. They're bringing in a new offensive coordinator, Ryan Grubb, who was with Kalen DeBoer when they went on the playoff run at UW. Grubb did not go with DeBoer last year. He is now the play caller for the Crimson Tide. What happened in Norman, what that game could look like in Tuscaloosa, and what Alabama is in general. I mean, it feels like whenever Oklahoma meets Alabama this year, it really felt like last year the outcome was a foregone conclusion until it wasn't.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know what to really make of that team with 100% certainty, and that for me is just like, if you want me to bring up something that maybe won't be discussed all that much, teach me about the Crimson Tide this week. Tell me what I need to know whenever Oklahoma gets ready to play them on the road and potentially Alabama gets to get a little bit of a revenge game on the home turf, but still a team facing a couple of different question marks or transitions.
No doubt. It's going to be fun. Media Days is one of those things, we joke about it a lot, like the different unofficial start of the season or whatever. Like Media Days is really the big one. Like when you get to Media Days, it really feels like it's season time, right? So excited to get out there. Tom Green and I, like I said, are going to be flying out there tomorrow morning, Tuesday. Oklahoma's on Wednesday, so we'll have full boots on the ground coverage from Atlanta. We'll have a short show on the podcast feed as well as on the YouTube on Wednesday. Tom and I will shoot a little something to kind of recap the day from Atlanta. And it'll be fun. Jackson Arnold on Tuesday. We're catching a break on the schedule because, we've been spoiled for so long. The Big 12 Media Days was in Arlington forever. And now last year, SC Media Days was in Dallas. So we just drove down and it was easy. So we were like, with Atlanta, it was like, let's just fly in Tuesday. We'll fly back Thursday. Just come in for OU's day. And we got lucky. Tuesday, Auburn, Georgia, Tennessee, and Texas. I mean, 3 of the teams OU plays, including Jackson Arnold, and then Texas, obviously. And the other team is Georgia, the favorites in the conference. And then OU's on Wednesday. So we're catching the 2 best days, I think, of SEC Media Days. So
you get Kalen DeBoer on Wednesday. You get the Crimson Tide. You get Jeff. Catch up with Jeff Levy.
Yeah,
Florida's a similar boat to Oklahoma.
He doesn't play them, but there's still some intrigue there. Yeah.
And then when are you guys flying out on Thursday?
I think we're on different flights, Tom and I, but I'm pretty sure we're both in the morning. So we won't be there on Thursday at all. Yeah.
I was going to say Eli Drinkwitz Thursday morning. March.
Thursday, this is 2 years in a row that the Thursday group on SC Media Days is a bit of a hodgepodge. It's a bit of a hodgepodge group. Whether that's intentional or not, I don't know. But yeah, Kentucky, Missouri, Arkansas, A&M. Just an odd group on Thursday. There's no heavy hitter in there, really. I mean, I guess A&M you could argue, I suppose.
I would give Elko and the Aggies the heavy hitter label.
There's not a clear every other day it's got a clear headliner. Today, I mean, if LSU, then you got Georgia and Texas, and then Alabama and Oklahoma, Florida, and then Thursday is kind of just an oddball group, but that's fine.
You got South Carolina has a chance to be real good this year. You have them today. Ole Miss is today. Hey, you got don't sleep on those Vanderbilt Commodores, right?
Lane's going to hold court today. If he hasn't, did he go already while we were recording? What time was that? Hope I didn't miss that.
I think he's around the time as we record. Yeah, he was scheduled for 1:30, so he hasn't.
Oh, beautiful. So I'm going to hop off and catch Lane's presser. I'll be dialed.
But I'll tell you what, man, A&M, probably the heavy hitter on Thursday. If you're looking for the heavy hitter just for headlines, there's no better than Eli Drinkwitz, right?
So, yeah, no doubt.
At least we'll kick off Thursday morning with potentially a couple of interesting thoughts and notes from the head ball coach.
No doubt. My flight's pretty early. I might be back before he hits the podium on Thursday, but if not, I'm sure I'll land and he'll have said a couple of crazy things.
Over under a half dig at Bob Stoops after the post game dig.
Probably over. He probably will slip it in there somewhere. He'll find a way.
It's gonna be fun though. It'll be cool, and you guys get to go out and see a bunch of our colleagues, coworkers in the network. So curious to see if you guys come back with from them as well. But looking forward to the week of coverage, and
it's always fun too to get a chance to talk to other, like you said, other 24/7 sites, but also just media in general from around the conference and just kind of how they feel about Oklahoma. It's always kind of a good way to kind of get a little because we're so close to it, every day living it, that it's kind of fun to hear a little bit of what everyone else in the league kind of looks at OU as, right now. That's always kind of a nice part about Media Days too, is you get everyone together, you kind of get to crunch it a little bit of how everyone feels about all the other teams, gets you away from your view of it for a minute. Yeah, it's kind of nice.
Genuine question to get us out of here as our final preview of SEC Media Days. You and I were talking about it off air. Is this week going to reveal the fact that the national college football landscape is actually higher on Oklahoma than OU's own fan base? Because I legitimately believe that could be a development coming out of the week. OU fans going, maybe we should have a little bit more faith in this squad relative to what everyone else is saying. I mean, that has a chance to come to fruition, it feels like.
For sure. No, this is definitely usually when, OU fans are always very optimistic in the offseason. The most pessimistic offseason I've ever been around since I've covered the team or even just been around the team my whole life, living in this state. This is usually around the time that, the head coach, whether it's Brent now or used to be Lincoln or Bob Stoops, whatever, you hop on the mic and you say some stuff and everyone gets fired up for the season. Are they going to be buying it? That's very interesting to me. Whenever BV gets up there and, does his propaganda, which everyone does, that they start to sell their team at Media Days, are OU fans going to be in or are they going to be out until they see it in the fall? I'm definitely interested in that part of it for sure. Remember when Lincoln got to the podium at AT&T and called it OU's second home once upon a time at Big 12 Media Days? That feels like a lifetime ago, but it's because it was, I guess, in a lot of ways. But it's going to be fun. Tom and I will be there tomorrow. We'll have full coverage from Atlanta, some tomorrow, certainly, with Auburn and Texas and everything else. But absolutely on Wednesday, we'll be there the whole day Wednesday. with everything Oklahoma. Brent Venables, John Mateer, R. Mason Thomas, Robert Spears Jennings. Coverage on the site, oklahoma.247sports.com. Be sure to subscribe. And, of course, on the YouTube channel here is where you're going to be able to watch Venables, Mateer, all the press conferences, all the everything. It'll be here on the YouTube channel. So if you can't watch it live, which they can't air everything live because these guys talk a ton at this thing, you can watch it all here on the YouTube channel. And, of course, again, coverage will be over on the site. And then we're going to wrap it up, Tom and I, and we'll have the full show probably on Friday. I haven't locked that down with them, but that probably makes the most sense. Next podcast on Friday to kind of wrap it all up. And I don't know if we're going to have the preseason poll by then or not. If not, we'll talk about that on Monday. SEC does it different, and they wait till after media days to drop it. So I don't know when we'll have that, but we'll talk about that at some point as well. CK, as for you and I, we'll be back next week. Hopefully we have some more positive recruiting stuff to talk about. We'll do that next week. But until then, my friend, we'll talk to you later. Appreciate you as always making the adjustment, coming to us on a Monday. And we'll talk to you next week, man.
I just do what I can for you and the good folks out there. But safe travels to Atlanta. I'd be lying if I said I wasn't jealous that you get to not only go do that, but hang out with all the folks out there. Give my best to the coworkers and to the Oklahoma fans out there. Appreciate y'all listening and watching. Feel free to subscribe to the site, $1 for your first month, because it's about that time of year. I'd be remiss. New addition to the shelf, Oklahoma commit Bo Bentley is the gatefold athlete of Dave Campbell's Texas Football Magazine, the Texas High School Football Bible. So congrats to Bo. Cool to get that in the mail the other day. And got the R. Mason Thomas on the cover of Phil Steele for me. It's that time of year, my friend.
Dude, it feels good.
To talk some ball.
It feels good. We're getting close. Fall camp is just a few weeks away. I mean, we're at media days this week. I mean, that's again, that's like you put the stake in the ground of football. We're getting close. 47 days today. We're getting close. It's gonna feel good. We're getting there. Pumped up though for the start of this season. Ready to get it rolling here very, very soon. So that's it for now. Back next week. Actually, back on not next week. I'm getting used to the Thursday. Back later this week. Media Days coverage on Wednesday. Full next pod on Friday. We'll talk to you then. For Collin Kennedy, I'm Josh Callaway signing off for now on Sooners Illustrated.